All right, good evening, everybody. How are we?
Good evening.
What, we got some people here. Excellent. No, Tikas, it's quite okay. I'm mostly making a very bad joke. Uh, Today on Twitter, I saw someone going, yeah, the farther away you are from a good culture, the more sin you do, blah, 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 blah. And some of these really weird Christian extremists is like, forgiveness comes only from Jesus. I'm like, nah, forgiveness comes from buying and selling indulgences. In fact, I will sell indulgences. So from this point forward, till I decide otherwise, anyone who subscribes to Patreon at the $11 tier also gets their sins forgiven. I don't care what the sins are. I don't gotta hear them. They're just forgiven because you spent $11 on two guys talking histories. Praise Jeebus. Okay. I'm okay. I
That
promise.
first statement that you made sounded like something from What If Altist.
Uh, well, it's the same kind of person. They were just, one of those Twitter users they throw up on your thing to make you hate people and then engage with them. It's a great trick that Twitter does. Is the more you hate post, the more they give you people you've hate posted about.
Has
Trust
he
me.
made the Incel Revolution video?
He's made another revolution video. I don't think he's made the incel revolution video yet. Uh,
Too afraid to do that.
no, this is not a person with enough self-awareness to actually be afraid. Like, let's be perfectly fair. Uh, he's just a couple fries short of a Happy Meal.
Someone should give him a teaching job at a local community college.
That would be horrible for local
It
community
would be
college students.
horrendous, but wouldn't it be amazing just to audit a class and
No,
sit in the back?
no, that
I'd love to
make
see the reading he assigns and the syllabus he makes.
needless to say, the last time we did a what if alt test video, I had to censor it for TOS concerns on your part. So no,
That's true.
I don't want you in the same room with him at all.
No. That's true. That's true. It's not really a great idea.
What he does also need is a copy of this document that we're talking about today, the Constitution of the United States, which is most often invoked in politics by someone who doesn't understand the document, trying to justify being an ass to people in the country they do not like on the grounds that they think it's constitutional, quote unquote, or shooting them, which is also not constitutional. And that's kind of I think the problem of the Constitution, right? Not its design, because it's actually a pretty elegantly designed document, all things considered. The Constitution, it's very long running and powerful in that regard, as we haven't had to change it out. Not like France, who gets a new constitution every time someone burps in Paris. But it's a very long lasting document. It's been durable, I think, is the best way to put it. And
Wouldn't you say
it's
that the amendments are good enough rather than doing an overhaul, for example? Um,
that I like. So I think that's a good point. That the amendments offer the way to edit the Constitution, and like they also tend to touch on things not touched on in the main text. Um, and they turn out to be incredibly vital, which is important because they weren't going to be included at first. And we're going to do a little bit on this overall. I need to move my microphone closer so you can hear me. Uh, we're going to do a little bit about a lot of this. This is not going to be the only night we talk about this because it's big and difficult. So, the first thing I think it's worth talking about the Constitution is how it's kind of organized. And this sort of speaks to the intention, I think, is you have the first three articles, right? Articles 1, which sets the powers of the legislature. Article 2, which sets the duties and powers of the executive, and Article 3, which lays out the fact that there should be a court. That one they kind of fell down on a little bit. And the kind of the recap, the thing we talked about with regards to last time and talking about the Articles of Confederation is that the Articles of Confederation do not create a strong government. They have substantial problems running the nation. The states themselves are not capable of governing themselves because they lack resources that they need to get from other states. They have fundamental problems. So there's this myth that the framers of the Constitution set out to create a weak central government that could be easily overthrown by the whims of whoever gets a bugbear up their ass that given day. This isn't really true. The articles come around, they don't work. They highlight severe weaknesses in not having a strong government. So already, even before the Constitutional Convention is called, there are a lot of the biggest figures in America, luminaries, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, are talking about building a better government. And that's what the Constitution is supposed to represent. The Constitution is not something that gets torn down anytime someone wants to be restrictive about someone else's rights. So, one of the key thinkers that a lot of the founding fathers read, and you will have heard his name in high school civics classes, probably, hopefully, unless your high school civics teacher is just an uppity gym chief. Montesquieu. He's a French lawyer. He's well before America's time. He dies in the 1750s. But he writes a very, very influential book called The Spirit of the Law. And the Spirit of the Law takes this idea and it divides government into two basic categories. And this is very, very short summation. It divides government into the sovereign and the administrative. So this is important when talking about the Constitution because this is kind of where they get it from. Montesquieu argues that the administrative is comprised of three principal pieces. It's comprised of a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch. And you just recognize that I said those are the first three articles of the Constitution. So yes, important. The second part of this is he's talking about the sovereign, or from where power is handed down. What gives you the authority to be a government, in short, and to rule over people? It literally comes off of the concept of a king. What gives the king that authority in these particular cases would be divine right. You okay here, Hetman?
I am sorry. I had to go tell a kid to go to sleep.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know why when you bring up the sovereign, I'm thinking of Machiavelli.
Because he wrote on this concept as well.
Oh, the sovereign, yeah, he did. Okay. Not useful for this, but yeah.
Well, kind of, sort of, in a certain sense. Machiavelli informs Republican politics in Europe for quite some time. Most of his work is about republicanism, actually, when you get down to it. But in this particular case, like an example, I think the most pertinent example is talking about sovereign power in England. So, for example, an English parliament will elect a set of cabinet ministers from the majority government, right? These cabinet ministers derive their power to rule the country.
Give me 1 minute, I'm going to be back.
Certainly. By permission of the crown. So the sovereign authority in England flows from God, in theory, to the king or queen, and then they invest it in parliament. the United States is different, and this is where it's radical for the time. Like this is where the Constitution is a radicalized document. It's not in what's commonly cited. People talk about, oh yes, we're a free country. We're not ruled by a king. We're not ruled by a king is important. But the concept of freedom and how that is diffused throughout a society is a very key question for European history for quite some time. Like the relationship between the nobles and the English, or the English kings and sovereigns, uh, exemplified by the talking about things like the Magna Carta. Like this dichotomy of freedom is unique.
I am back.
Excellent. I just got to the good part. The Constitution in and of itself is unique in that they posit very quickly, right at the beginning of the Constitution, they posit where the sovereign power is vested from. Sovereign authority comes from us, the people of the United States of America. We, the people of the United States. This is it identifies who is doing this in the preamble, like what they're doing this on behalf of, but they're also identifying whose authority they are invoking.
How does this differ from, for example, like parliamentarism or like the British system after, for example, after the English Civil War? Do they have anything comparable to the United States at the time?
You kind of missed my explanation. I'll do it again. Anyway, we're talking about sovereign power here. The articles themselves, like I said, outline the administrative functions of government. Sovereign power, in the case of what we're talking about here, is who is in control. So, strictly speaking, in England, the sovereign power flows from God to the monarch, who is crowned king
Yeah.
or queen, and then they vest that power into Parliament.
Okay, so
After the English
that's
Civil War in particular, the answer is it's Oliver Cromwell is Lord Protector of England.
mhm.
Um, but he's also going to claim that God has given him that position, even though he does not claim the station of monarch, strictly speaking.
Interesting. That's actually something I did not know. I actually the English Civil War and its impact on everything else is something that I really want to study a bit more.
I think the aftermath and how this affects Great Britain for the next 100 years or so is really interesting. The Civil War in and of itself is, well, bloody.
I'm looking actually right now, and I'm seeing 120,000 estimates. I mean, non-combatant deaths. That's astounding for that time.
Yeah, they got into it a little bit that time, uh, quite a lot.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of the distinction of Montesquieu's distinction of sovereignty and administrative. And so the Constitution dispenses with the question of sovereignty very quickly. We, the people of the United States, and it gives a reason for doing this, and it basically saying we claim this authority as a body of people. And that's, I think, the first thing to understand about the Constitution's uniqueness there is it establishes this. There is no requirement for a divine, for divinity to grant the people power. It is simply them deciding to do it for themselves.
Interesting.
All right. So let us move on to Article 1, which I'm not going to read word for word because that's very boring. But I will bring up two historical points related to that and then let Hetman yell at me about them. Article 1 invests legislative powers, that first branch, broad branch of Montesquieu's idea of administration, in a legislative body.
When you're saying article, you're basically that's the First Amendment, right?
No, amendments go after articles.
Okay.
The articles are the first. There are 5, 6. No, actually, there are 7 total. There's something on ratification, and a couple other things. There are 7 articles, right? In the Constitution itself. Written,
Okay, I see. I'm looking. Hold on. Keep going.
yeah, written prior to the amendments. The amendments come afterwards. But this is what was produced on and voted on by the ratifying states. The first 3 articles lay out the administrative powers of the federal government.
Legislative, executive, judicial.
The 4th article lays
Relationships
out
between the states.
how states interact with one another and basically puts them on an even footing. And 5 provides for amendments, and 6 is debts, and 7 is how they get the Constitution into effect as the government of the land.
Can I mention something just about Article 4?
Go for it.
So does this have any, like, is this about the rights of states as well? Or is it more like what does it mean by the relationships between the states?
What it's designed to do is create parity between the states.
Okay, so representation then.
No, representation is established in Article 1. This creates parity between the states by setting certain limits on interactions. For example, Article 4, Section 1 is the full faith and credit clause, and it says full faith and credit shall be given in each state to public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state, and Congress may by general laws prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, and proceedings shall be proved and the effect thereof. So, for example, this is what lets you get married in Illinois and you move to Colorado and have your marriage recognized as valid.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Full faith and credit clause, it would be possible for, suppose, the governors of Colorado and Texas got in a tiff, and the governor gets his party in, the governor of Texas gets his party in Texas to advance a law saying that we will no longer recognize marriages performed in Colorado, which he could then do to put the squeeze on Colorado and piss off that further.
So this is essentially a safeguard against.
This is essentially a safeguard against the presumption of sovereignty by the states.
Interesting. Yeah, I really, I don't know. This is just showing me how ignorant I am of American history in general.
That's why we're here, to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Leviathan was written in the 16th. What? The Civil War. The English Civil War was what Hobbes was referring to in Leviathan. The American Civil War was in the 1860s. Sunday probably has suffered through Leviathan. I have suffered through parts of Leviathan.
I remember being assigned to read it in one of my undergrad classes, I think, on like political philosophy or something like that, and it was not something I enjoyed. I didn't enjoy Machiavelli that much either, to be honest.
I don't think I've ever met anyone who's gone, yeah, Leviathan is my favorite book.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I was assigned Machiavelli, various philosophers who had an impact on political thought, and I know people who really enjoy reading Machiavelli, and I didn't care for it.
Someone clip that and throw it up in the cathedral so Calamaeus gets mad. Anyway, yeah, Article 4. The other thing it does is well, it does a couple other things. It's basically a safeguard to keep the states from trying to overpower one another, which becomes very easy for certain states because they have resources or people, etc., etc., etc. But the first I want to bring up is, okay, Article 1, Section 2. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states. You see, taxation is not unconstitutional. It's right here in Article 1. Which may be included with this in this union according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years. That would be indentured servants, and excluding Indians not taxed, and 3/5 of other persons, which would be those who have been enslaved in the colonies at this time. This particular sentence and part of this section is a result of one of the fairly famous compromises that we teach as part of American civics, the 3/5 compromise. So it goes that the northern states want to count apportioned representatives in the House by population, which is agreeable to most of them, except for things like Rhode Island and Massachusetts. But New York is all for this, for example. And Virginia is pretty much for it too, and these are very powerful blocks in the Constitutional Convention. But states like Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina are very small states right now, and they're worried about getting overpowered. So they want to see all of their slaves, who are not going to be represented directly by the House, counted in the population counts for these states. And the northern states, and even the smaller states that aren't entirely enthused with this plan, turn around and say, well, that gives you an incentive to bring in on even more slaves, which is not great. Ergo, they say they don't like this plan. And the 3/5, which means 3 out of every 5 is counted as a person, is a compromise presented to guarantee the southern states a measure of political power. There is, however, another set of provisions in Article 2 that become dependent upon this. Article 2 is what outlines the executive power and how the president is chosen. And it creates the electoral college. The electors are apportioned by census, so that it's the same mechanism as the House. You about to say something?
I was. The one thing that, and this is just looking at things kind of like holistically with our Constitution. You get the feeling, that it's all meant to balance power, and
well, it's meant to do two things. It's meant to balance power. They apportion particular powers among the three branches, right? And the other thing it does is it insulates power. So let's take the Electoral College, for example. The popular vote it's a very well-known gripe that many people have about America. The popular vote is not a guarantee of an electoral victory. Thank you, Tikas. It's not a guarantee of an electoral victory. The popular vote usually indicates how the electors are going to be eventually apportioned, but it's not a requirement either. In fact, there are very few requirements on electors. The idea of the Electoral College is that the voting population, which at this time is already low, right? It's comprised of property owners. And property owners of a particular skin color, being white. So like it's only a very small portion of the population that actually gets any kind of vote whatsoever in this system that's being laid out by the initial Constitution. And even at this level, they felt it necessary to put a safeguard against an unfit candidate being chosen for president. The second big indication is back in Article 1.
Obviously, that didn't work.
Yes, that has been less than successful for a multitude of reasons. The second biggest point is in Article 1, and it's when they're talking about the Senate. So the Senate is not a direct election by the voting public either. The Senate is appointed by the legislature. So there's a layer of insulation between the upper house of the legislature and the voting people, that they can take decisions somewhat independent of the will of the rest of the country. Why are we loudly typing?
Sorry about that. I'm looking up more constitutional stuff.
Fair enough. At least initially, until it is changed by amendment, there is this separation, like quite apart from the framers of the Constitution seemingly enamored with the concept of a mass of people voting. They seem to be working very hard to make sure that the mass of people can only affect very few things at a time.
Sorry, I'm just. Are you there?
I am here, yes.
Yep.
There is a I actually like this part. Section 6 talks about being compensated. It also says they shall, except in cases of treason, felony, and breach of the peace, be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses, and in going to and from.
I'm looking at Palm Dad's comment right now. What were the numbers of registered voters in the very earliest elections?
Very hard to accurately tabulate. Let's look up George Washington real quick for his first election.
Did people in the territories, for example, like the areas, say they were living during the election of George Washington, for example, or some of the preceding presidents, if they were in, so if there were like settlers, for example, in like
Ohio.
Ohio, yeah, exactly what I was going to say, Ohio, they could not vote.
Uh, so settlers, they didn't get any electoral votes, so they're not connected to that particular. They
So
can vote on
they would
matters.
still be a part of the popular vote.
They can vote on matters that are pertinent to the governing body of that territory, up until
Okay, that
that
makes sense.
territory becomes a state.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that is like Article 5.
It's the same thing today, for example, with like Puerto Rico or the
Yes.
other overseas territories. Like Guam, of course, doesn't have an electoral vote.
I would note that you will note that primaries happen in these places. For example, Puerto Rico, Guam, all the Virgin Islands, etc., have primaries. That's party wide, and since the political parties are strictly speaking corporate bodies, they're not bound by the Constitution, and therefore can include those areas as they see fit.
Okay.
Yeah, so Wikipedia has numbers for each election. There aren't that many people who are voting, and in these early elections. And the other part of this problem is kind of the way elections are done is really by individual running for office. Um, especially early on, early on, even when political parties get introduced, the political party does not really organize, and the state doesn't have the same control over elections in early American history that they do now. So now you register for your state, they give you a polling place, and you go and you get a ballot that is approved by the state, and you vote on that ballot, and everyone is basically voting on the same ballot for a general election, and primary elections depend on the state and what their rules are. That is not how it works in early America. It's literally wild wild west. So you'll
Yeah.
have like John Smith is running for county commissioner in blah 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 county. He will print up his own ballot for his position and his election, and you will vote on that ballot, and it will carry any politicians that John is either, you know, patroning, a patron of, or being patronized by on his ballot. It won't include his opposition though. So if you want to vote for John Smith, you can't vote for their opposition of any of those people, type things. So it was very much in need of standardization.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And this goes on for quite some time, and there's a whole lot of dirty nonsense that goes on American elections, uh, like getting people drunk and taking them to vote, etc. Things like that. Uh, this is the least dirty our elections have ever been, contrary to Donald Trump's ranting and raving. Have I sufficiently over answered your question?
No, yeah, you haven't over answered it. It's been very insightful for me. I feel just embarrassed because,
Well, it's not like you've done this in what, over a decade since
it's
you had to
been a
take
long
American
time.
history?
It's been a long time, and I feel like I should know it because it's a basic.
Because you live here?
Because I live, yeah, and that's the hard part actually in facing some of these aspects of some of you know these topics is I've dove very deep in in my field in Eastern European history and specifically Ukrainian history, but yeah, I just it's kind of like one of those things where you can't see what's in front of you. But I no, I actually I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying learning these things. Um, that I've of course, like I had a civics class in high school. I had, I believe, like another basic one in undergrad, but it wasn't something that you know that I carried with me. So
Yeah,
it's
I
it's
think
good.
that's kind of how it's supposed to work, though, really, when you get down to it. Like, a
But
lot of people.
that's a bad thing, though. That's not a good thing that there's so many, because I'm not you know unique in this.
No, I don't think it is, but by the same token, that's kind of how. Once you get into graduate level history, like a person will take an undergraduate history degree and think they're smart, and then they'll move on to graduate level history courses and get smacked in the face, because that's like the 400 and 500 level courses is when history gets hard. Um, and you have to concentrate. You have to work very much inside the lines of a specific thing. That isn't a bad thing in your particular case, because you spent all this time doing history for Ukraine and Eastern Europe, but you know how to do the thing properly. So you
That is
understand the
true. Yeah.
methodology. So all of a sudden, if you want to switch gears and go, let's study uh, the history of snail people on the Isle of Lesbos off of Greece, you're equipped to do so.
Of course.
Uh,
And I am equipped to relearn early American history, but
exactly.
it's
The
just not
problem,
a
there is a
yeah.
twofold problem, though. Not everyone is able to do that because they don't necessarily have the inclination to do so for a number of reasons that we'll get into in a second, or the ability. Uh, the problem with the inclination is this is stuff that's very pertinent to how we operate today because it governs the United States today. So, for example, the current situation in Texas, with Texas trying to enforce immigration law, which is a province of the federal government, that is a constitutional debate happening right now as we speak. Uh, Greg Abbott is a dick. Carry on. But
He is.
it's a thing
The
that's
issue,
happening.
though, yeah, it's incredibly unconstitutional. I even think calling mobilizing the National Guard for that be
Unconstitutional, yes.
skirting it by some means.
If the National Guard was on the border handing out blankets and relief supplies, they'd probably be
Then
well
yeah,
within
no,
their
that would be
rights.
constitutional. That's what they're there
Using the
to do,
National
right?
Guard as the border patrol is not constitutional.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I don't think that's constitutional at all. Now, the federal government putting the National Guard there, that's within
But that does
the
a number
power
of,
allotted by the Constitution.
sure, but that does a lot of very important things for the National Guardsmen around things like their pay and uh, their time and grade and what law they're working under and what expectations there are of them. Because,
And they're not police either. They don't have police powers by any means.
oh, that's a very
So there's
complicated
something,
answer.
yeah.
Because they do, but in limited circumstances. We have an act in the United States called the Posse Comitatus Act.
That's what I was just going to say. That's
This
the
forbids the regular army from acting as law enforcement on U.S. soil. However, you will note, if you have a passing familiarity with American history, that there are several occasions when the National Guard has been called out, sometimes against the will of their state's governor. For example, when they were deployed uh, to integrate schools, and the military has been used in those capacities. So there is a line that is skirtable for the military. Or, more recently, in January 6th, the National Guard was eventually used to empty the capital of insurrectionists.
we can think back to I mean, for example, like I don't know, for example, in Detroit, for example, in some of the riots that
Yes,
occurred there, or
that is
uprisings,
a
whatever you
not
want to call.
insignificant. That is a not insignificant part of the history of Michigan either, too. Like that was talked about by my grandfather even in the early aughts. So, like,
They sent in paratroopers.
yes.
So that's how is that not a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act? What were they there to do?
Well, that's. I have to check what unit was involved in that because I think it was a guard unit.
I don't think I mean, they had the guard unit there, but they eventually sent in paratroopers. Detroit.
Detroit. This was the 67.
101st, 102nd.
Yeah, I need to check the rationale on this. The Army National Guard in Detroit.
Oh, and I'm even thinking
I have to check. They might have invoked the Insurrection Act. I gotta look here. Hang on. Because the Insurrection Act is also another explicit wrench in this system. Yeah, the 67 Detroit riots, they used the Insurrection Act. Or at least were planning on it, and then the governor allowed U.S. troops to enter anyway. It is, like I said, a not insignificantly sticky wicket. In theory, only a declaration of insurrection and martial law can allow the United States military to act as a policing force.
So martial law then was probably declared in that instance of the.
It would be a function of the Insurrection Act.
Okay.
Well, we got derailed.
We did, but I think that is very important.
Yes, it's also beyond the scope of this crap. Let's talk about the Supreme Court here because it's kind of a mess. You will recall that the Supreme Court has the power of judicial review, which lets it decide on the constitutionality of actions taken by Congress and the executive, the president. That is not in Article 3 anywhere. It is assumed as a matter of case law. It's a fairly early case law too. It's Marbury versus Madison, where the Supreme Court decides, hey, we have a job that we'd like to do, and we're going to assume a level of power that's frankly fairly ridiculous. Which brings an excellent point. If Anton Scalia realized that the power of judicial review wasn't in the Constitution, would he have turned to stone? Or any originalist, really. Like originalism is bullshit, by the way. It is a right wing excuse to be able to say whatever they don't like a contemporary thing isn't in the Constitution explicitly, so therefore we don't have to do it anymore. That's what it is. It's bullshit. But like the very power that they are exercising to have this frankly tyrannical interpretation of the Constitution in effect is not in the Constitution. So shouldn't they disappear in a puff of logic? Like I think that should be a rule for being a lawyer. Like you get like vaporized if you are illogical. Particularly if you're going to be a jackass and pretend you're more logical than everyone else. That was a brilliant idea. I don't know why you're not singing my praises.
Sorry, I got stuck down a rabbit hole.
This is why we finish research before the show goes live.
That is true.
Actually,
okay.
That's an excellent plan. What you should do is buy a stream topic from Sunday and make him read the spirit of the law on stream. Tell him I sent you.
Wait, we can. That's a thing.
Oh, that's totally a thing. It's either I think it's $20 for a stream topic. Let me check.
What is Sunday doing? I mean,
he's being sick with COVID right now.
Yeah, but what's his he's a political scientist, right?
Yes.
Interesting. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the articles right now.
The articles of Confederation? They're fascinating.
No, that was from last time.
I know.
Okay, can we get to the amendments? Or is that later?
We can. Which one do you want to talk about?
Well, me and you always have interesting conversations on Amendment 2.
Give me a second.
But, I mean, that's a whole different...
Yeah, stream requests are $20 a month. Very easy. Anyway, you want the Second Amendment? Let me bring it up here.
We should probably go from. We should probably start with the First Amendment and then maybe go down.
Article the first, after the first enumeration required by the Constitution, there be some one. That's not the right thing. These are not my amendments. Bill of Rights, a transcript. Here we go. Amendment 1. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, clause the first, or abridging the freedom of speech, or clause the second, or of the press, clause the third, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. There's a lot contained in Amendment 1.
There is, and there's a lot that has been violated. I mean, just look at the Mormons, at least in the early part of their history.
Yes. There is a caveat to this. This establishes limits on the federal government. It does not necessarily establish limits on the state government. However, most state governments take this amendment and port it over into their own constitutions. So here is, let's talk about the first clause. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This is a huge sticky wicket, right? We have today in the United States a faction of people who feel that if they are not allowed to exert their religious views on other people, that they are being oppressed. These people are assholes.
That is 100% true.
This is a make no law respecting the establishment of a religion. This is the cornerstone of the concept of the separation of church and state, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This second part's important too. The concept is that a religion, whatever it is, can be practiced side by side, and there is not cause for war. Because they would have the lesson of European history to go by. They'd understand the history of the French Wars of Religion and the 30 Years' War. And irrespective of what you think of the devotion and fidelity of these figures to their faiths was, they managed to cause an awful ruckus by fighting religious wars. So the idea is to create pluralism here in the United States. They already have this in the colonies to a certain extent. For example, Pennsylvania is founded famously by a Quaker family and is a haven for Quakers. You have other faiths, the Massachusetts Bay, famous for the Pilgrims and their particular brand of piety. You have different faiths taking root down south. You have Christian groups that are wildly at odds with one another who are nominally Christian, right? Less so for religions like Judaism or Islam, which are very powerful forces in Africa and Eastern Europe, for example. But not so much here to the same extent.
Of course.
So the first portion is to establish that no one religion can be made dominant over others, can be made a state religion. This is extended a bit to suggest that religion should not be a guiding factor in the creation of law, which is obviously a controversial opinion. There also is the Andrew Wilsons of the world who think that as long as they don't make a state religion and they just make the law as religious as possible, it'll be the same thing. And those are inarguably, well, arguably, I suppose, because people are still arguing it, but I would say inarguably unconstitutional.
Why do we have one nation under God
As the
in
motto,
our Pledge of Allegiance in the
okay.
Bible and certain places like within government that it shouldn't be? Like for example, I don't know if it's still practiced. I don't think it is. I would hope not. But like in court, swearing, to tell the truth under you putting your hand on the Bible to do that. Didn't they do that too at the inauguration, like the um, inaugurations of presidents?
So, swearing an oath on the Bible is a tradition that comes over from English common law.
Okay.
And since most of our legal system was picked up from English common law, we port over a lot of things. And this concept of oaths on a holy book, you can take the oath on not a Bible. It's not usually done because we have an unofficial Christian test to be president in this country. Uh, but for example, if I was elected president, I could have any old book to swear the oath on. And in fact, if I was going to take the oath, I would almost certainly swear a book on a Berenstein Bears book.
And why?
Why not? Yes, you can also affirm. As for the line "One Nation under God," it is commonly attributed to the Red Scare. It shows up in other places prior to this. There is a evangelical religious streak running through American history that is impossible to ignore. Uh, I think the question asked a little bit more broadly is, why do we allow certain exceptions to what is blatantly religious favored behavior? Um, and I think the answer is a force of tradition. Like we carry over a lot of traditions from our English forebears, uh, and our European forebears. Like things they did reflexively, we continue to do reflexively, even if we see the necessity of removing the political aspect of it, because we
So
want to
that
avoid the French wars of religion. So, for example, you will see military units have a prayer. Um,
that's another thing I was just going to mention is that's
things
something
like
that
things we assume acceptable, even if they are, strictly speaking, probably ill advised. So, I never particularly see a particular problem with that. In a lot of these cases, as long as it's low key, there are some groups that try to take these things too far and push too much God and religion into a frankly uninterested population who doesn't want to be preached at outside of a church. I think it's fine to start a party, a military party with a prayer. I don't think it's fine to compel people to participate.
no,
Just
it's
have them show up
certainly not.
the course of it. That's the kind of stuff where we have to be like measure the tradition against someone's zeal type stuff. Um, there are also, I would point out, inside this amendment, other assumptions of freedoms as well. You have a freedom of association too, that is presumed by the First Amendment. So I don't have to hang out with people I don't want to hang out with. You cannot compel me to do so. Uh, and that goes alongside things like freedom of speech in the press and the right of us to assemble. Freedom of speech is there are exceptions to freedom of speech, right? They are outlined much better by people like Legal Eagle, who has a video. I think it's literally called "Can You Yell Fire in a Theater?" Um, that is worth checking out. The freedom of speech is never intended to be absolute. Also,
That's what I was just going to say.
along with that comes that freedom of association again. I am not required to associate with you if you say heinous shit about someone I like or a group of people. For example, Elon Musk tried to make this argument when he first took over Twitter that it was illegal for the advertisers to leave him for implementing rules that made it more easy for people to say racist things on Twitter and get their brands associated with those racist things people were saying. And no, that's not how the freedom of speech works. You get to walk out on people who say stupid shit. It is your right. And I there's a very obvious caveat to things like the right to peaceable assembly. Most localities, including the federal government, have places that they can designate for protest and can keep you corralled in there, and will use that oftentimes, getting out of hand, as an excuse to break up the protest, which is another story entirely. But before we do that, we might as well give everyone the sound bites they want and talk about the Second Amendment, because I feel like you and I.
Oh, jeez. This is going to be, this would have to be a whole.
No, it won't. The Second Amendment reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Okay. Who wants to see me and Daedalus get into a debate? Not now, but have a whole stream dedicated to a debate on the Second Amendment.
I'm stoned now. Let's do it now.
I don't want to do it now. It'll last all night.
Yes, it will.
And I will get in a lot of trouble.
No, that's not my problem. Actually, she might make it my problem. That's entirely possible.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would rather. Oh, it could be interesting. So Palm Dad says yes. Tika says yes. Yeah, let's try to arrange that. Should we do it when we get 500 subscribers, or should we do it?
No, we should do it before, because I'm not entirely certain. Has anyone subscribed tonight? You should subscribe to the channel. It makes me happy.
Makes me happy too.
Nope, we're still at 441.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a packed. We do have a packed schedule for the next couple of days. Tomorrow, I'm resuming Ultimate General Civil War. We're fighting the Battle of Antietam. It'll be, well, not fun, but it'll be an experience.
Are you fighting the CPU?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually not a half bad AI. It deals with situations very individually, like on an individual basis. So it's not really able to coordinate an army. It just moves units, but it's not half bad. It's fairly reactive to the problem in front of it, not necessarily to the problem I'm setting up like 2 miles down the road, but to the problem in front of it. It's pretty reactive.
So it's a pretty good linear system.
Yes, particularly because it does rely on linear storytelling, and that's not the right screen. And a certain amount of, like, for example, it sets up stages for the battles for you. For particularly for multi-day battles in particular, it usually hits multiple stages. Well, since the Second Amendment is going to be controversial, let's move on to Amendment 3. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Can we both agree that this amendment is not nearly as relevant today in the modern military environment with barracks and centralized housing for soldiers as it would have been at the time? That the change of situation means that this amendment is not nearly as sacrosanct, or at least not as highly regarded a matter of contention.
I mean,
and he's very reluctant to say yes because he knows where I'm going to go with this.
I don't
Have a
have
good
the
night,
same
Tickus.
interpretation of the Second Amendment as you, and this is something that you know.
Right.
I
But
view it as for the individual.
if the Third Amendment can be interpreted as being less relevant, then we also can fairly interpret the Second Amendment as being a relic of a different time, particularly before the Militia Act of 1901.
Well, we'll save this for debate, I guess.
Amendment 4 protects you against improper searches and seizures and unreasonable searches and seizures, although that's one of the ones that the Supreme Court really likes to chip away at in favor of the police. Amendment 5 protects you from self-incrimination and requires you to be indicted by grand jury for any crimes you commit. Well, felonies, big ones. 7 is the right to a speedy trial with an impartial jury, and your right to face the accuser and to have witnesses in your favor and to get counsel.
Very important amendment.
7 is about common law, about civil cases in excess of $20, which I think basically if you're suing someone for less than $20, back then it's a lot of money. Today, if you're suing someone for less than $20, you should be allowed to be beaten by the bailiff. I don't even think you can take suit for $20.
Could wait. Say that again.
I don't even think you can make a suit in any jurisdiction for less than for $20. Like I don't think that's a thing you can do. Like the court would laugh and laugh and laugh.
I mean, well, just the time alone would be like even for 20. I think that's too little.
Yes,
Just
it
the
was
time
big
alone.
back then. It was a large amount back then, but it also illustrates how some of these amendments are not timeless.
Of course. And no, getting back to the second, you're right.
Excessive bail shall not be required. No cruel and unusual punishments.
You didn't even hear me affirming you.
I did hear you. I'm choosing to take the win and run.
You haven't won yet. We're still going to do a debate or a talk on it, at least.
But I will win in the future. Tenses are funny. 9 is actually really fucking important. It basically says that it basically undermines the doctrine of originalism rather severely. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people, which means that, yes, women still do have the right to get an abortion, and all 5 of those fuckers can suck it. Sorry, I'm okay.
I actually have to use the bathroom very, very badly right now.
Okay. We're going to take a tinkle break. 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay.
Okie dokie. Main screen and throw Hetman back off of mute. All right, now people can hear you.
Hello?
Hello, it's me, Daedalus. You are not Hetman.
I'm not. I was asked to take over for a moment.
Oh, well, how are you doing?
I am well. How are you?
I'm excellent. I might do this where I take an edible before streaming more often. It's wonderful. That's an excellent point. Legal in the state of Colorado, not legal federally. However, the federal government, well, I suppose they technically could come and prosecute me, but it'd be a waste of time and money.
Right.
Gray area of federal authority.
So I am just going to note that I don't know what the topic is exactly.
Oh, we're talking about the Constitution and the Constitutional Convention.
Okay, I think you did mention that. And what has been said that's kind of like if you wanted listeners to take one thing from what's been said so far?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the most important thing to realize about the Constitution is that it's not true that it was intended to create a weak government that you could overthrow willy-nilly. No government would accept that. The idea behind the Constitution was to create a durable union between the states that is unbreakable. And if you try, we'll send the army to bring you back.
So I asked Matt to tell me kind of if listeners were to take one thing so far from the conversation, what he thinks that would be, and that's what we were.
Yeah. It would be that Greg has horrible bowel problems right now, but also that
I don't want listeners to take that away. In fact, it was entirely unnecessary.
yeah.
I don't know where you're going with that.
Anyway, sorry. I really I had an emergency.
Yes, it's time for everyone to send Hetman unsolicited eating advice about how he should eat better. Suggest corn. Yeah, not legal in Indiana. That is entirely true. However, it is legal in Illinois.
Not legal in Indiana.
No, marijuana is not legal in Indiana. Which is
pot is not. Yeah, Palm Dad, you're from south of Bloomington, right?
Which is fine for Indiana because they have plenty of crystal meth.
That's the truth.
Why don't we complain about crystal meth? Because it's a white person's drug distributed by white people to white people.
You know what's
who see the spiders?
Marijuana is still criminalized federally. And that's a big problem for anyone who wants to apply to, say, like a who has to do a lie detector. What'd you say?
A federal posting, sure, but like they're gonna have a very hard time enforcing that as the situation. Oregon, Washington, Colorado, California. Eventually, they're gonna have to give in and legalize weed federally and just be done with it.
I don't know why they're not giving in. Is it other states resisting that?
No, it's a territory thing for the DEA. They're disinclined to yield ground, even though marijuana was made illegal for a pretty bullshit reason.
Yeah.
It was designed principally around creating anti-Mexican hysteria, which is the theory was that Mexicans would smoke marijuana and then chase white women, which was used as one of the rationales for cracking down on immigration. One of those times that we did it a lot. It's a cyclical thing here in the United States. And B,
wasn't it done like right after the Second World War?
Yes.
That was your first, yeah.
and B, to try to control the labor market, which also didn't work well for anyone. Getting rid of international drug treaties, though, international drug treaties are fine and dandy, except for the fact that if I, for example, am in Colorado, I'm pretty sure that you have to grow the product here as well. You cannot have it cross state lines. It's been a particular problem for most of these states that have similar rules because, for example, they way overproduced for a while, a couple years, and now they kind of underproduce. And then there's the tax money implications. The Coloradans get a rebate every year from the pot tax. Uh, like it creates a whole lot of things that would be a lot easier. Not to mention easier on the judicial system if we weren't arresting nonviolent offenders for marijuana-related crimes. And maybe the president could use that power of the pardon to let nonviolent offenders who were put in jail on marijuana crimes in federal jail and take them out of federal jail because keeping them there is silly.
Mhm.
Well, hemp is an incredibly useful plant for a lot of things. Rope, in particular, it's very good at making strong ropes. Um, so hemp was very valuable, particularly during the Second World War, when rope was very valuable. Uh, it's very hard to underestimate how vital this plant has been. I suspect through a good portion of human history. Um,
Are you talking about the marijuana plant and
hemp and marijuana
hemp
in
and all its
general.
variants?
Yes,
Yeah.
most of its variants. It's a kind of a finicky plant if you want to smoke it. My understanding is that the people who grow it and grow it well are kind of like artisanal gardeners of a very high degree, that
Hmm.
are working with a lot of chemistry and science to get things right. But like as a mass product, like hemp for rope, easy to grow, it grows everywhere, kind of like a weed, because it's weed, and you can make a lot of it cheaply. And rope is also a fairly essential, like, stepping stone on the technological, like, growth rung, right? Having the ability to tie things to other things is a big deal.
It was interesting. Home Dad might know of this place, Brown County, Indiana. There was it's kind of like a little tourist trap historical village, and
I
there's like
think I know what you're talking
a
about.
real what was very interesting actually is there was a I don't know if they were reenactors, but there was actually like a hemp um a group of hemp growers there. And what was interesting is I found out that the hemp in general was illegal in the Soviet Union through my Ukrainian teacher. Um, yeah,
They've had
even though it's
they've had plenty of problem with potatoes and vodka.
yeah,
Oh, that was the other great import that the Soviet Union saw after it fell from the United States. We imported crystal meth into Russia, which did not do that country wonders either.
no, it did not.
Um, it turns out the crystal meth is a really shitty export.
I've heard that it's actually variants of it are exported from Mexico, particularly like by drug trafficking organizations there,
Well,
which kind of surprises me because I always thought in certain states it's produced
in most states, it's
by
primarily
locals.
produced in locally and usually
Yeah.
by people who are either gang or white supremacist gang affiliated.
Hmm.
There's a not insignificant amount of chemical know-how that goes into that as well, and bad working conditions, which usually result in meth labs being death traps that will explode at the slightest provocation. Well, we have gotten well out and truly off the beaten path here.
Yes, it doesn't help me being with a stomach problem, and then you.
So
Yeah.
let's
Yeah, well, I'll get into that.
call it here because I am obviously we have a topic to schedule now. A death duel over the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
So I am going to thank everybody for showing up tonight. I'm going to invite you to do two things. The first thing is to subscribe and like the stream if you haven't, and subscribe if you haven't, because it makes me happy. The second thing is I invite you to consider supporting the show on Patreon. We will be back tomorrow in the afternoon, my time, to fight Antietam. It'll be fun. Unless you're a Confederate, then it will be not fun. But that's my favorite thing, is Confederates not having fun. And then I will be checking out Resistance France 44, which it turns out I have early access to, so I'm going to play it a couple times before I bother.
Wait, is this like a partisan?
It is exactly that. It's an XCOM style game where you play as a team assisting French partisans in setting up a resistance network. About
That
2
sounds
months
amazing.
prior to D-Day.
That sounds fantastic.
Yes, I will be doing that Tuesday night, and we might be doing other things as we get them scheduled.